Hello, everybody, and welcome to our World Regional Geography class for Tuesday, the 8th of December. We are working on Southeast Asia this week. We have 2 more weeks to go, this one and then next week. As you have already seen, we have a homework assignment that is due tomorrow night. Okay, I'll go to the modules and show you. I'm not sharing anything, am I? Okay. If you go to the modules right here under week, the 4th quarter unit, we have our internet assignment number 4, Trouble in the South China Sea. I posted something this morning just to remind everyone that we have this assignment due. It might seem like a lot, but these are a lot of slideshows, not slideshows, videos and little PDFs. They're really short, maybe a half a page each. These are a little longer up top. But you could see that this started in 2015 and there's 2014, the end of 2014, and it is progressed to a point where it could be the next start of World War III. Okay, we hope not, but possibly. So if you find any newer stuff, please post that in your assignment so I can update some of these. Because again, 4 years ago and 5 years ago and 3 years ago, it's a little long, but I wanted to keep this updated as much as possible. But you can see here, if you click on any of these pictures, it brings up the reading right there. So you don't have to download anything. This one's a little longer, 7 pages, but there's a lot of maps and pictures in there. So it makes it look bigger than it is. Okay, and the whole idea of this section here is you can see China up here in the yellow. The South China Sea is a huge territory, and the reason why China is trying to take that over is because of the possibilities of hydrocarbons, sources of energy for its booming economy. This 7 dotted line, they call it, now it's the 9 dotted line here. This was on a map somewhere in the 13th century that China is now claiming as theirs, despite the UN and all other international organizations, treaties they've signed, saying that the dotted lines that are in blue are really the territories per each country. And the central section there is international waters, supposedly. You're going to read up and see videos and slideshows showing that Chinese forces are building up these atolls and underwater sort of islands that are now below water, up above water, putting rocks and sand in there, and then putting military bases on there to protect this area. So this is a huge transportation section here from China and Taiwan, Japan, anything that goes to Europe and India and Africa has to go through the South China Sea or way around the Philippines or over the North Pole, which is starting to happen more and more with less and less ice. But the traditional way is down through here, the South China Sea, over past Malaysia to Singapore, or Jakarta, and then over to the Indian Ocean that way. So this is a really big, vital place. The U.S. is the big counter strength to China here, because of we're the biggest bully on the block. China is the second biggest bully on the block, and they're sort of getting together and butting heads right through here. Again, we have a lot of naval facilities here in near Taiwan because they are our friends and they're sort of democratic. Vietnam has turned more not democratic really, but more westernized and open. And there's our former colony, the Philippines. And again, we are the biggest guy in the block, but China is the up and coming teenager with spunk and muscles, and they're wanting to reinforce their territories. The other way to think about this is think about what we did, the United States did back in the 1800s and early 1900s with the Caribbean Sea. We've had the Monroe Doctrine that said all Europeans get out of the Caribbean Sea. This is our territory or our sphere of influence. And then in the early 20th century, 1900s, Teddy Roosevelt with his big stick policy sort of pushed people out. Of course, that's right after the Spanish-American War, which drove home the idea that this is our sphere of influence. So South China Sea sees this territory, the country of China sees the South China Sea as their Caribbean Sea, their sphere of influence. But it's a little different because we're trying to get out of there, but there's other countries there that still want the rule of law to be held. And China took that UN ruling and said, we're not going to follow that at all anyway. So that's a little bit of a background, and just there's 3 you should read here. Again, there's a lot of pictures in here, so don't think this is really overwhelming. And then skim some of these. Okay, there's a couple of videos and other things like that. And then there's extra things if you're interested in this area here. Okay, remember this is due before Wednesday night, which is tomorrow night. And I think there's only 1 or 2 people who have posted. There's Miss Shabria, of course. Excellent job being there early. So please post and then respond before Friday night. That should be Friday night, not, and those dates are wrong. I'll change those. So there it says Friday the 11th. So it should be December 9th and December 11th. See, take those off and it works like that. And that becomes Friday. And of course, I can't type today. So there you go. So Shabria, do you have any questions with that? You did post it already, so that's good. What were some of your takes from that?
I went a little all in and said that we should also do what China is doing and start building military bases and seawalls, and we could start in the Gulf and protect our people from rising floodwaters, as well as protect our sea, and then we can start protecting our #1 shipping lanes in LA and Long Beach, and kind of start building stuff out there and prepare for World War III.
Oh boy.
Sorry.
I don't want to, yeah.
That's what I think.
World War III is hopefully years and years and years away, but you never know.
Well, I'm saying we should get ready.
Yes, get ready, because you always should, you always want to project peace, but you always want to plan for war.
Well, that's why it could be infrastructure, like I said in my post. It could be infrastructure as well as desalination plants and other things we could build out there, so it doesn't look like we're trying to build up our military.
That's right.
Just like they're doing.
Well done. Just like they're doing. They're doing the same exact thing. So why should we be different?
Can't beat them,
so
join them.
That is you. Yeah, if you can't beat them, join them. That's right. And again, China is playing the long game. They have the idea, they've been there for forever, and they'll be there forever, and that's what their idea is. So playing the long game and thinking that other countries will get tired of it or too expensive. It's on the other side of the Pacific Ocean, so the U.S. doesn't have the guts for another long war, another long dispute. So that's what China's sort of thinking. So, all right. So that's our reading assignment for this week. Make sure you look at that. And it's right up here at the top of 4th quarter, right there. Okay. So here's chapter 13's overview. Okay. It talks about Southeast Asia. We're heading south from China into the Southeast Asia area. All the resources are right here. Here's the chapter links for you, the free books. This is the conference Zoom we're doing right now. And this video lecture is a little more detailed. It does talk about, there you go, describing trouble in the China Sea. It does talk about Southeast Asia, South China Sea, Jakarta, all these things a lot more detailed than what we're going to do today. And it also talks a little bit about the fourth quarter exam. I have extra credit opportunities here for you. You can see the Saigon Times and Vietnam News, which are English versions. If you find anything that you want to add to this via extra credit, like the Philippine Manila Times or Jakarta Daily News or something like that, Singapore's state news, I don't know what it is, but you could find that and just let me know so I could put there for extra credit opportunities too. Okay. And then right below it is your homework and your extra credits, and there's your Zoom meeting too. Okay. So, all right, so here is Southeast Asia, and let me do it this way here. Okay. This is the most globalized part of the developed world. Yes, sort of. What you're seeing here is the rest of the world has compartmentalized regions, and they're really easy to define. You have similarities in these regions, like Latin America speaks Spanish and Portuguese for the most part, mostly Catholic. That's changing slightly. Subcontinent of India is defined by its isolation, whether it's gigantic mountains, huge deserts, and a big ocean blocking it from everywhere else. China is the same thing. East Asia is the same thing. Southeast Asia is sort of cobbled together. It's like whatever's left. And you could see that they define this as two separate zones. One is the mainland or insular. And let me turn on the slideshow to show you a little larger so you can see it. Okay. The mainland Southeast Asia are the countries, 5 countries here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 countries on the mainland. That includes Myanmar, formerly Burma, Myanmar. This is where they have the refugees that are being kicked off and moved to an island this week. You have Thailand, the huge sort of the bulb right here, and then a little stick to the southeast, including the Thai Peninsula. That's the Malaysian Peninsula, but it's mostly Thailand there. Cambodia, which is famous for Angkor Wat. Yes, they spelled it right. Angkor Wat, which is this old ancient archaeological site, religious structures, city in the jungles of Cambodia. It is also famous for the killing fields of the 1970s, where a communist regime called the Khmer Rouge took over and started murdering anyone with ties to the West. So if you had glasses, that meant you were an intellectual. So they killed you or put you in working fields until you died. They emptied the cities. They tried to turn back the clock to when the Cambodian Empire was at its height, which was around the 700s, the Khmer Empire. And then they restarted the clock, the calendar, to year 0. It did not go very well. And then, of course, the leaders of that, the Khmer Rouge folks, Pol Pot was the leader. He was tried and convicted, but then he died really old. But that's what Cambodia was about, and they're really still struggling 40 years later, 35 years later, from that devastation, from the killing of 2 million people, maybe more, indiscriminately. It was really terrible. The country of Laos, Laotian people, mostly mountainous. It's a nice spine along the mountain ranges here. It's very thin to the south and big and bulbous to the north. Laotian people you see in the United States a lot as refugees from the Vietnam War, from the Cambodian Khmer Rouge purge, including a lot of, they've been kicked out from China before. So the Laotian people are, it's really, they don't have a really strong economy. They're landlocked. The only outside resource they have is the gigantic Mekong River, which goes from China all the way through most of the Southeast Asian countries and then empties out into the Mekong Delta by Ho Chi Minh City, formerly Saigon. Vietnam, you might have heard of before, maybe, if you know anything about history. That's where we had the French Indochina War after World War II, where I think it was Ho Chi Minh actually looked to the United States right after World War II when the Japanese were expelled. And he said, we need help. We want to become a republic. We want to be free from this overlord colonial French government. And then we said, nah, French are friends of ours, so we won't do that. And then Ho Chi Minh said, well, all right, well, if you're not going to do it, I'm going to see who else can help us. And he looked to the north, and China was there, communist China, and then the rest is history. The North Vietnamese, the communists, kicked the French out. Then we started the American War. They call it the American War. And that was a long, drawn-out struggle, and eventually the communists won, kicking out millions of Vietnamese refugees, including some of my friends. And a lot of them settled either in the Washington, D.C. area or Southern California. And today in Westminster and Orange County and South Los Angeles County, we have a huge, huge section of the counties of the state with huge Vietnamese populations. First, it was the people who left, and then it was their children and grandchildren, obviously. So that's the mainland Southeast Asia. So questions at all, Shabria? Since you're the only student here.
No, not yet.
Okay, not yet.
Not yet.
All right. So that is the overview of mainland Southeast Asia. Now we go to the insular Southeast Asia, which is the exterior sort of off the continent. And these are the islands. Okay. And you can count Malaysia as an island because half of the country is on the island of Borneo and the other half is on the Malaysian peninsula. Okay. And then once we start, and all of these, especially those facing the South China Sea and the Java Sea here, there's a huge population that is Chinese descendants. We're talking from the 1400s, the 1300s, all the way up until the 20th century, 21st century even. Because China had such a huge fleet, it was the largest fleet on the planet. It ruled the seas in the 1300s and 1400s. Until one day, one of the emperors said, you know what, we don't want to do that anymore. They burned all the shipyards and they turned into themselves. But at one point, the largest fleet on the planet, I forget the admiral's name, he went all the way to East Africa, brought back giraffes and stuff like that to the Beijing court. But from that ancient history, lies that 9 dotted line that we looked at, and the 9 dashed line, and then also huge populations in Singapore, Kuala Lumpur, Ho Chi Minh City, Da Nang, Bangkok, Jakarta, the Philippines, Manila, that have Chinese descendants in it. So you'll see some of the data in the book or any of the books talking about the huge, well, not huge, but 15-20% population has some Chinese ancestry to it, which is large. Okay, so down, I'm sorry, not down. Off the mainland, we have the big islands, the huge islands. You can see there's thousands and thousands and thousands of them. Okay, at the very tip of Malaysia, the Malaysian Peninsula, is the island state of Singapore. This is, you can see here, right next to the equator. So it's hot and humid, obviously. But Singapore is an island state that is an entrepot. It's a big trading center. And it's the link between Asia and the Indian Ocean, and the drop-off point. You used to have a lot of ships coming to Singapore. They'd unload here, and they'd load back onto bigger ships going to Europe and Africa and India and the Persian Gulf. Jakarta was also one of these cities, but because of the Sunda Strait and the volcano called Krakatau, good, spelled right, or Krakatoa, as we hear in the United States here speak of it. This exploded in 1883, and since then, this is really not a preferable way to bring your ships through that area, because as you heard in the last couple of years, Krakatoa exploded again, huge tsunami again. This was in the age of the cell phone and the internet, so you could actually see it happening live. Back in 1883, it was the first worldwide disaster because a couple years earlier, the telegraph cables had gone all the way to Jakarta and then on to Australia. So within a day, the whole world knew of this disaster in 1883. Again, Krakatoa was a huge volcano that exploded. It destroyed the whole island. It disappeared. It's now under the ocean. And it produced a huge tsunami that killed thousands. And the explosion was heard all the way up in Beijing and all the way across the Indian Ocean to Madagascar. That's how loud this thing was. The big, gigantic earthquake in 2004, what is it called? The Boxing Day, which is the day after Christmas. The Boxing Day earthquake in 2004 near Banda Aceh. A-C-H-A. No, that's spelled wrong. Banda Aceh. It'll come up. I'll look that up in a couple seconds. Oh boy, that's even worse. Anyway, this produced the 2004 tsunami that wiped out 250,000 people in the Indian Ocean basin. They had a 9-point-something earthquake, followed a couple months later by an 8.7 and a 7-point-something. And all those movies about the tsunami in Thailand and all the resorts. It also wiped out people in Sri Lanka, southern India, the Maldives, and all the way over to Kenya, actually, and Somalia in East Africa. The other gigantic volcano that is so famous is down here in the southeast section of Indonesia called Tambora. One word. And this exploded in 1815. We didn't really know what happened until a couple of weeks later when everything started getting great sunsets, but started getting really cold. The sun was getting blocked out by all the ash. And it led to the 1816 summer, which was devastating throughout the world. It was the temperature dropped, the sun's energy was blocked from reaching the surface. We had major crop failures and huge famines around the world. Killed over 5 million people, they think. But that was Tambora, and they call 1816 the year without a summer. Indonesia is somewhat the same size as the United States, and it stretches from this line right here, from it splits the island of Papua New Guinea, all the way over to Banda Aceh, and it's consisting of 17,000 plus islands, which is really difficult to govern. If you have the size of the United States, but there's no interstate highways, it's all water, it's really hard to feel like you're part of a unified country. Because the countries, the islands over here, Celebes and I can't even see some of these tiny ones. Timor, now it's East Timor is a new country, but all of these islands are sort of separate, and they've been separate for such a long time. Cultures are different. You know, the cultures here in Eastern Indonesia are completely different than Borneo or Sumatra or Java, completely different. But as you'll read, it was a big push from the Javanese government to link all this together. So they sent a whole bunch of people from Java, the big island of Java, to all these other islands to sort of unify the country. It's sort of worked, it's sort of not worked, but 17,000 islands are a lot of islands, and it's really hard to govern all that. Borneo, the big island in the middle here, is made up of 3 different countries, of Indonesia to the south, Malaysia, and then Brunei, which is an oil-rich state right in the middle of Malaysia. Then all the way to the north, you have the archipelago, or if you're British, archipelago of the Philippines. Again, you have 13,000 islands, a little more tighter than Indonesia. But again, 13,000 islands is nothing to be easily governed. And the southern islands, Mindanao especially, are a lot different than the northern islands. There's more Christianity to the north, Islam to the south, and it's a somewhat poor country in terms of economic output and trade with the rest of the world. And they have a bunch of volcanoes there as well.
And a bunch of internal strife.
And a bunch of internal strife, exactly. You know, and we think of the Philippines as our friend. You know, our current government is somewhat aligned with their current government. But besides that point, this was our colony for a long time, from the Spanish-American War all the way up until World War II. The famous MacArthur vowed to return to free the Philippines from the Japanese World War II occupation. This was the site of the Bataan March that marched thousands of captured soldiers, and then many of them died because they were just treated by the Japanese terribly. So this was for a long time, you know, sort of our little sister, our little brother. And then after World War II, the United States granted them freedom, granted them independence, unlike what they did to Puerto Rico, which they still haven't done, or statehood. But the Philippines became an independent country in 1945 or 46 or something like that. So again, it's not strong. It's not a big, strong country. The big, strong country that is fighting against China is probably Vietnam. It's the most populous of these countries, except for Indonesia. It's the most populous that are around the South China Sea. And Vietnam and China have always butted heads, always. There's a great story about northern Vietnam over here. There's like this river valley that like the tides go up and down a lot. So there were 2 separate incidents over 1,000 years where the Chinese fleet came to destroy the Vietnamese, and the Vietnamese sort of drew them into the bay, into the river valley. And when the tide dropped, they had put all these spikes underneath the water. So the boats all got caught on the spikes and drowned, and then they got attacked by the Vietnamese. That happened twice. And as someone with a lot of Vietnamese friends, they're very, very proud of that fact. So this is the Southeast Asia in a nutshell. And of course, you can go in and there's stories all over the place. If you want more detail, just let me know about some of these countries, some of these regions. But there's your overall tour of Southeast Asia. Questions, Shabria? Everything all right?
Yep, everything good. I have a lot of friends from the Philippines.
Okay.
And they were a lot of people in the Bay Area.
Yes.
We actually had a church full of just Filipino people, and they're very Christian, never showed up on time, but always brought potluck meals.
Oh, that sounds like, yes, that sounds exactly like the friends I knew in New Jersey and Virginia that were Philippine Catholics. Yes. Not that we're stereotyping at all. Not at all.
I mean, there was about 50 people and they all showed up late, but all brought delicious food.
Yeah. Yeah, so the Philippines, the Filipinos, we have a lot of population in California especially, but the United States too. Because we were such friends for a long time, we do have those economic and cultural ties with Philippines. It's not the Philippines. The Philippines are the islands themselves. Philippines is the country. It's kind of strange. But yes, that's a great point. Thanks so much. And you can see here these dotted lines, these are the plate boundaries. So those tectonic plate things we talked about in chapter 2. The collision of the Indian plate into the Filipino plate here is causing, you can see from Sumatra all the way through Java, you see these islands full of volcanoes. And of course, gigantic subduction zone earthquakes, which are the largest on the planet. So Java, as you can see in the next couple slides about population, Java is like the most populous island, or the most densely populated island on the planet. Most of the Indonesian population, which is over 200 million people, by the way, most of the population is shoved onto that big island of Java. Okay, so climate-wise, and you can see here this blue line of tropical typhoon through August through October, and you could actually follow that to one of the huge typhoons that tracked right into South Vietnam this October, actually. Some of the biggest storms that we've seen in the Western Pacific have slammed directly into central Philippines in the last 5 years. And then they curl up and hit Taiwan, or they go straight into Da Nang or South Vietnam. These are devastating, especially for the poor, low infrastructure islands that many of these islands are. And again, they're isolated too, because they're islands. Yeah.
My friends in junior high. So what was that? Like the mid 80s that happened, and two grandparents and aunts all died in flooding. So a whole bunch of people had to fly back to the Philippines for funerals, and it was very sad when they came home and brought pictures of everything and how it looked.
Yeah. These islands are actually devastated sometimes from these huge storms, because again, there's nothing stopping it. It's all South Pacific or Western Pacific. It's all very, very warm. The only good thing that they have going is it's very deep. Unlike what we have in the Gulf of Mexico and the Caribbean, this is much, much deeper. So it's cooler on the bottom, warmer up top, but still, it's not. You still get category 4s and 5s every year. Also, these arrows here are showing you the air movement from the ITCZ. No, not easy. ITCZ. There you go. That intertropical convergence zone, again, in the northern hemisphere in the summertime, it moves further north. So that's why these yellow arrows are showing you the airflow, the moisture flow into the Philippines, into South Vietnam, into the Malaysian Peninsula, and into Thailand. And then in the wintertime, January, the ITCZ shifts south of the equator, and then you have the airflow coming from the north. And again, it's a little cooler, but you still have a lot of rainfall in Singapore and Malaysia and all that stuff. Okay. The climographs, you can see many of these climographs have very high temperatures, and because you're in the tropics, there's not much of a variation between months. Further north and west you go, obviously Rangoon, a little bit cooler in the January and December time, but not by much. Hanoi was probably the coldest of these cities here because, again, it is further north. It's a little bit inland, but not much. And you can see it does drop down. It's kind of chilly in January. I was there in January. It was kind of chilly. not freezing cold, but chilly. You do have the mountains in Vietnam and Laos and Burma that get really, really cold. I'm sorry, Myanmar, that get really, really cold. Myanmar. No. Anyway. And then the highlands of Borneo. And then, of course, the tallest mountain and volcanoes are actually here in the Papua New Guinea island. Okay, but most of this territory is warm and humid most of the year. You can see a lot of pinks, okay, whether it's dark pink for the monsoons or savanna pink, which is still hot and humid most of the year. But again, the difference is the rainfall. You could definitely see differences in seasonal rainfall, okay? I was in Da Nang for most of February and January, and we barely had any rain, but I went back and it was tons of rain in the fall, tons of rain. And you can see there, Manila is the same way, okay? Hanoi, somewhat similar. Rangoon, somewhat similar. Bangkok, very similar. Okay, so you do see these. And then of course, Singapore right on the equator. That's why it's virtually every single day is about the same. And you do have a little bit of an uptick, but not that much between months. Okay, so we also, and there's your ITCZ line, Intertropical Convergence Zone line right there. Okay. Insular island climates. If you know anything about biodiversity, there is a line. Oh, there's a population. We'll get to that in a second. There's a line that sort of separates. Maybe it's this one here. That's the Chinese. Talked about that one already. Colonization. Geopolitical. Where's the globalization? There's Tet. So the slides that have the big festival of Tet, the big, gigantic, huge holiday of Southeast Asia. It's not there. Okay. I think in one of the books, I'm not sure which one it is, there's a line called the Wallace line. If you are familiar with any biodiversity whatsoever, the animals and plants from Southeast Asia sort of split off somewhere right around here. And some biologist or naturalist named Wallace, he was a contemporary well, what's his name? Goodness gracious. Survival of the Fittest. How do I not even know his name anymore? Anyway, he was a contemporary of the 1800s, 1850s. The Wallace line separates sort of the mainland type of animals and plants from those of Australia, Australasia. Okay, and the kangaroo, the koala bear, the platypus, these are separate because of these island chains. And so they grew up and they evolved separately from those from the Southeast Asian territory. So they call that the Wallace line. If you ever want to know, if you ever hear about that, talking maybe a different class about ecology and stuff like that, the Wallace line is the line that separates the mainland type organisms from the Austro-Indian organisms. All right, so population map. I touched on that a little earlier. Population densities are really, really huge in areas that have great farmland, flat zones, right? The volcanic soils of Java make this one of the most productive places on the planet. Hence, that's where you have a lot of people living there. Okay. And yes, Java, that's the coffee. Okay. So Java there, and you can see here that it's so populous that this is why they started sending people from Java to the other islands, because A, it's too populous here and the other ones are sparsely populated. And B, it sort of connects the 17,000 plus islands together as one sort of country. Okay. Again, northern Philippines, many more people than the southern Philippines. The coastal zones, of course, where you have either coastal areas or river valleys, like the Mekong River Delta, the Bangkok Delta, the Rangoon area, the Irrawaddy rivers. These river valleys will produce flat farmland, enough for great series of agriculture, and then obviously people. Okay. So there's Borneo, there's Java, and we're talking about that a little earlier. Okay. There's all sorts of agricultural problems here, including overpopulation leading to cut and burn agriculture, SWIDN they call that, slash and burn. Plantation agriculture is taking over the best land, as we saw in sub-Saharan Africa. Takes away the best land for profit agricultural products, and then leaving not much really good land for people to actually feed themselves. Okay. Rice is the big crop here, and I don't know how many of y'all know how to grow rice, but you grow rice first. You grow it normally, and then you flood the field. And of course, there's plenty of rain here, and this is why you have these terraced levels along the hill slopes, so you could have more fields. You flood the fields because rice can survive a flooded environment where a lot of weeds cannot. So that's why the fields are usually flooded for rice. And then those dry out, the rice grows, then you harvest them, and it's dry when you harvest them. And then I've seen them on the roads. They put the stalks on the roads, so the trucks and the cars and the bikes and the mopeds run over them to separate the husk from the actual thing you eat. So I'm like, really? You eat that rice that's on the ground being run over by trucks? Like, yeah, of course. It's easier than breaking apart each little grain by your hand. Okay. Again, this is how people have lived for thousands of years. So who am I to tell them no? All right, going back to the population, the demographic changes. You can see here how Singapore used to be a developing country, and hence the big triangular pyramid shape. But let's see, they don't have a date on these. It's 2018, but you don't know. Since the 70s or 80s, maybe 90s, Singapore has developed a high-tech industry. It's become very rich, affluent state. So having a city and population growing a city, as we've learned, is really not sufficient for a good family. So people have cut their children's numbers, not cut the children, cut their children's numbers from having 3 or 4 children to having 1 or 2, because you live in an urban city and it's much more expensive living in a city than in the countryside. So you see that big drop off of children due to that changing economic affluence of Singapore. However, Philippines is a Catholic country from the Spanish way back when, and the Catholicism really drives and is a big influence on the government. So even though the government understands that their population is overflowing, it's getting really too crowded, they're having all sorts of stressors because of a growing population, the Catholic Church has that influence enough to where they will not let any family planning, any contraception being sent to the whole country. So that's why you have a huge population growth and a huge birth rate. Hence, you could see the big, gigantic population pyramid, where this is the age of the percentage total population. You could see, let's see, 6, 5, 5, 15, 20%, 25% of the whole population is under 20 years old. And again, as you grow older, you don't have the jobs, you have famine, you have diseases, there's a lot of poverty. So your numbers dwindle as you go older. Okay, comments at all, Shabria? Anything you want to add in here?
Nope. The Catholicism definitely for the Philippines. That's a major. I mean,
it's a major issue
thing. Yes.
Yes. I used to do a comparison between China, India, and Philippines in terms of population growth. And there's different reasons. China had cut their population growth because of that draconian one-child policy. But the Chinese were much more in tune to the bigger is the group is better than the individual. So they sort of they sort of went along with that idea much better than India did. India is a democracy, so you can't really tell people you can only do this. And the Philippines is governed by, well, not governed by, but under the influence of the Catholic Church. And Catholicism has always preached more children, each sperm is sacred, no contraception. And you see the differences there. And the Philippines is running away. Their population is still growing tremendously. Did the Pope say anything about contraception in the last couple of weeks or months? I thought I saw something.
I'm not sure. I'd have to ask my father-in-law if he knows, because he would be up on that, but I don't know.
Because if the Pope would say something about contraception in terms of, first of all, STDs and diseases, but also overpopulation, that one decree could change the overpopulation of the planet tremendously, because we have a large minority of the population in the world that are Catholics. So having that one decree could change a lot of people's lives. But again, that's not for me to say. That's each culture, each religion has their own viewpoint of the world. I'm just putting it out there for you to decide. Demographic changes, again, population settlement, because we have large growing populations in poor regions of the world, you do see migration patterns. Going to the industrialized or high economy, high economic output countries like Singapore, Japan, Hong Kong, and the Persian Gulf. Okay, a lot of folks on the, what is it called, the ships, the cruise ships, the cruise lines, they are Philippine and Indonesian workers, and they are away from their families 10, 11 months of the year, and they send a lot of money home, which then supports their families. But in order to do that, you have to go where the money is, and you have to go where the jobs are. So as we see in Latin America with the United States, as we see with Southwest Asia and North Africa with Europe, we see the same exact thing with Southeast Asia and Southwest Asia, or other big cities and big economic partners of Southeast Asia, or even there's Japan or Australia. So it's not just a US, American, Mexico, Central America thing. This is happening all over the planet. Again, if you are a mom or a dad in the Philippines and you have 5 or 6 kids, and the farming isn't working, the city's crowded, there's an opportunity for you to leave and make money and keep your family alive. It's really not a hard choice. Well, it is a hard choice, but it's not, it's life or death. So you do what you need to do to keep your family alive. And as we're seeing with the World Cup coming in 2022 in not Bahrain, it's Qatar, or Qatar. A lot of these folks from the Southeast Asian territories or the Himalayan areas are going to the Persian Gulf and having their passports revoked and taken by their employers. And it's sort of like a slave economy where they don't have any rights, and all the native peoples in the Persian Gulf are the ones that are really rich, the oil, the natural gas, and you have a second-class citizen economy coming in as workers. So again, it's all interrelated, it's all interconnected, and that's what geography does. It shows you these pathways and interconnectivity of people and places.
There's a good movie about that called The Liar's Dice. And
can you put that in the chat room? What is it called?
Liar's Dice.
The Liar's what?
Dice. Or yeah.
Like that? Okay, and what's that about, Shabria?
It's about a mother who takes her daughter to go find her husband and the father, because he has been sent to a different country. I forget what country it was. He was sent to another country to work there, but they stole his passport. She stopped getting money. They stopped phone calls, and he had ended up like working in a dangerous like construction, and I guess he died, and she found that out once she got there. But it was about that and her journey through the whole thing, and another man that she had met from a different area, and it just talks about how they went through and her struggles and how this happens every day to millions of people.
That sounds like a really good movie. Yeah, and it happens to thousands and thousands and thousands of people all over the world.
Yes.
Yeah, excellent point. So going back to what Shabria was talking about sending money home, in the chat room I said it's money, these money sent back home are called remittances, and we've heard that term before when we talked about Latin America, because we see that here in the United States, where workers from abroad come and they work in the United States, or someone from Apple Valley moves to Los Angeles because there's jobs, and they send money back home for mom and dad to survive. We see that with Mexican migrants and Central American migrants moving to the United States, working and sending a lot of that money home to take care of families. That movie, Liar's Dice, that Shabria referenced, you see that same exact thing, people moving to Singapore or moving to the Persian Gulf, working like a dog, sending a lot of that money home to take care of their families. It's called remittances, R-E-M-I-T-T-A-N-C-E. And it's a huge influx of money for these poorer countries. I remember going to Vietnam when I was younger, not in the war, I'm not that old, but my friend is one of those boat people who escaped, one of these people, one of the millions who left, and he went back in the late 90s when it opened up again. And you could see the economy of Vietnam just explode during the time of Tet, which is the big, gigantic lunar festival, the New Year's festival most of East Asia celebrates. So those remittances injected millions of dollars, American dollars and others, into the economy, which really drove and pushed the economy forward. These remittances are huge to a lot of countries around the world. So when we hear about that in the United States with, these Central Americans and Mexicans coming and taking our money and sending it home, it's not just us. This happens all over the place. Again, it's what people will do to keep their family alive and fed. Okay. And some of you do that too. You know, we send money back to mom and dad, you know, for things that they might not have. You know, you might send money to your brother, your sister, because you might have a job and they're still struggling, or they're in school and they need the help, and you as the worker can provide that help. So these remittances, they call them, can go from state to state or city to city or country to country. So that's a really good point you brought up there. Thank you. Migration, there's that term primate city that we might have heard about in Latin America and Africa. Okay. You could see these, and that population map showing you these huge cities. You've probably heard of these, you know, Manila, Jakarta, Ho Chi Minh City, Hanoi, Bangkok, Rangoon. These are huge cities, and they call them primate cities because they're usually the prime or the #1 city of the whole country. Students flock from the rural zones to these big cities because of the opportunity of a job. Okay. Students leave Hesperia and Adelanto and they go to Las Vegas or Phoenix or Los Angeles because of these job opportunities, and they send money home. In many countries, there's just one big city. They call it the primate city. It's usually the largest, most important. It's the economic capital, it's the political capital, it's the cultural capital of your country. So many Southeast Asian nations have this primate city. One that doesn't would be Vietnam, because Hanoi to the north, and that's because, you know, mainly we had those two countries for a while during the Civil War. You had Hanoi to the north and Saigon in the south. Now Saigon is called Ho Chi Minh City. But most of these other countries do have a primate city, just like we saw in South America, Central America, Sub-Saharan Africa, North Africa, and Southwest Asia. Okay, we see that, and even Europe. Europe has that, you know. London is an excellent example of a primate city. Paris, Rome, Moscow. These are huge cities that are the everything to a country, called primate cities. And it's great for the big city because you pull in all of the knowledge and the smart people from around the country, bringing your city up. But it's terrible for where those people are coming from because it's something called a brain drain. Good, brain drain, which means you're pulling the smartest people from the rural zones and the small towns and the small cities to the big city, and then you're losing all of that brain power, that diversity, that drive, that chutzpah, that stuff that drives economies. That's not hotspot, it's chutzpah. Forget it. So that's a primate city. You could see a lot of these places are like that. And then there's the Chinese. I talked about the Chinese earlier. The provinces of origin from the southeast coast of China, where it's really, really overpopulated. And then for a long time, Chinese sailed across the sea and settled, and you can see Southeast Vietnam, the Bangkok area, even Rangoon, the Malaccan coast, Singapore, all the way down to Jakarta and Java, Borneo, all over the place. And that's why you still have, look at those population numbers. And again, this is 8 years ago, but 9.5 million people of Chinese descent live in Bangkok, live in Thailand, I'm sorry, Thailand. It's a lot of people. Okay, so then there's the chapter talks about the different religions here. Islam, you might not think of it, but Indonesia, sorry, is the largest Muslim country on the planet. There's 200 million plus people living here, and most of them, because of trade and trade routes way back when, most of these folks are Muslims. that extends all the way up into the southern section of the Philippines. Okay, there's a map right here. You see the southern section of the Philippines, Malaysia, all the way into Borneo and a little bit of New Guinea, Papua New Guinea there. Okay, again, the spread of Islam came with trade routes, just like we saw in Southwest Asia, North Africa. Trade routes brought this new religion to Southeast Asia. Now, I think it is still the most populous country in terms of numbers of Muslims. And India still, I think India has like 170 million Muslims, which is a minority. Right? That's really hard to think about. 170 million people being a minority, but it is. You can see Christianity brought by the Portuguese and Spanish colonizers. The missionaries were here. You can see the yellow Christianity is in the northern section of the Philippines, all throughout Indonesia, and the northern sections of Myanmar and the mountains of Laos still there. And that's why we have a lot of, when Laotians come to the United States, most of them are Christians being persecuted or being isolated. So a lot of missionary groups in the US will go and bring Laotians to the United States because of that Christian religion. You also have, there's Islam, you have Buddhism. The purple zone there is Buddhism, the blue zone is Buddhism, and again, it's mixed in. Again, Buddhism started in the Himalayas and then moved to the Southeast Asian area. And most of the insular, the mainland Southeast Asia is Buddhists. Again, it's mixed in sections of Vietnam, where, you know, my friend's family was Buddhist and Christian and a little bit of Taoism and a lot of animistic beliefs, which is, you know, ancestor worship. So one story, we were traveling in Vietnam and it was getting late, and my friend said, we got to stop here. We'll go to the restaurant and we'll see if there's any place we could stay. And he saw a Christian church, a Christian cross in there in the house, and we were able to stay there. And the next day, my friend said, you know what? My grandfather told me, he said, this is a safe place. This house here is going to be a safe place for us to stay. All throughout my stay in Vietnam, there was always ceremonies, talking to the ancestors, talking to grandma and grandpa, talking to the ones who came before you. And that's sort of an animistic belief system where it's not based upon texts or anything like that. It's based upon family values and history. It was a big deal. And as we go into the slides here with Tet, it's all about relatives coming back to celebrate, whether they're alive or dead. Okay, so during these big feasts, mom and the aunts would set the food out on the table and wait 15 or 20 minutes for the ancestors to eat before the men would eat, and then the females would eat somewhere else in the house. A little strange for us, but again, you're in somebody's house, it's their culture. Okay, so the ancestor worship, you can see the joss sticks and the candles, welcoming back the ancestors to join them in the feast. And then, you know, the younger generation, we all ate together, but in the older generation at mom and dad's house, it was ancestors first, men and boys second, and then the women and the girls would eat in the back in the kitchen area. Okay. We also visited Grandpa's grave. Okay, and again, you can see all the joss sticks everywhere. And there's my friend Mai and his sister-in-law. We're there to pay respects to those who came before us. And what I really took from this was my friend, his name is Mai, M-A-I. He sort of felt really responsible and upsetting his ancestors because he left Vietnam. He was one of the boat people that escaped the communists. But as a Vietnamese person with this ancestor worship idea, it is your job to take care of your family members who have passed. It is his responsibility to make sure that grandpa is still doing okay, and to make sure your fields are being tended after because your grandparents and your ancestors took care of those fields. And that's why the Vietnamese community, the Filipino community, it's really difficult to leave sometimes because you're breaking that tie with your past. So I respect him and his family for keeping those ties. And it was really difficult. And there are pictures of dad. He never smiled. Every single picture, it's always stoic and strong and you know, like a big rock. And then mom was nothing but smiles. Nothing but smiles all the time. So that's the family that I stayed with, my friend's family. But that is what, and there's children everywhere, obviously. But Tet was the big celebration of family worshiping and visiting graves and feasts for everybody, and ideas where the first person in the house after New Year will bring good luck or bad luck to your family. You know, you sweep and you pull, you pick the stuff up and you put it in a garbage can instead of sweeping it right out the house, because you're sweeping good fortune and luck out of the house. So Shabria's going, yep, I've heard of that. So it's really cool. And Tet usually happens either late January or early February. It's based upon the lunar cycles. So it's the first new year after, the first new moon after something. And everyone gets together, you visit family and friends. Everyone's birthday is celebrated during those 3 days. So my friend really doesn't know when his birthday was. It's always celebrated during Tet. So it's a little different. So it's kind of cool. And I was really honored to be able to share this huge event with his family. And of course, all of his family members and extended family wanted me to visit because I was that American, that rich American. I was like a student with no money, but I was an American, so I must be rich. And they wanted me to be the first visitor in their house because that would say the whole year coming up would be fortuitous. So, yeah, that was fun. So, just showing you a couple little pictures of Vietnam in the 1990s, which was a long time ago, I know. This was his family's house, middle class. He has an uncle on one side, an uncle on the other, families all together. You know, this is what the town looked like walking to his house from the train station. Smaller and smaller paths all the way up into his house. Again, we're in central Vietnam where it's hot and humid all the time. His house stood out because they have glass windows. And because the parents sent both of the boys away to the United States to escape the communists, they were able to bring and send back money home. So they were one of the few people in the neighborhood with glass windows, with a refrigerator in the house. You know, it was a big deal. This is their internal shrine. This is the Buddhist shrine. And again, they're also talking to, the aunt's husband who passed away and grandma and grandpa who passed away. So it was really a great experience. You can see it's a long time ago, I know. And this was different. This is a different way to put kids to sleep. So Shabria, try this if you want, right? And the kids got to be a little younger. But when we put kids to sleep, we hold them tight, we rock them like this, right? This they put in the basket, and the daughter is going like this, swinging that girl back and forth. And it seems a little violent, but within minutes, that kid was asleep. Little different. So again, mom smiled all the time. And then this is the kitchen. And there's the well that you'd clean up stuff after meals. And again, no matter how many times I said, let me help, let me help, let me help, I was not allowed to help. And there's the toilet. Yeah, as I'm going to leave this so people could say, how does that work? There's no chair. You stand right here. There's a little hole, and then you throw the water down the hole to clean it up. Yeah. So, all right. So, yeah. So that's about it. And this is Saigon or Ho Chi Minh City back in the 90s. If you look on Google Earth right now, it looks completely different. So let's go down here. And I know y'all don't want to see any of my trip pictures. It's not exciting, but here's Ho Chi Minh City here.
I'm sorry, I'm the only one here, and I find it exciting. So
that's cool.
It's
Thank
okay.
you. Okay, good. Thank you. All right. So where are there any pictures anywhere here on Google Earth? I guess not. Yeah, that's not working for me. So apparently the Google car has not been around South Vietnam lately. But here you go. Here's some pictures. It is full of cranes and big buildings. That is completely different than when I was there. Let's go to here. Maybe we'll see it here. Nope. The city is huge and it is completely different than the one that I knew way back when. Here's the main, there's the airport. I don't know. Anyway, it's gigantic. And there's cranes and buildings and all sorts of great stuff all over the place. Huge towers and city stuff that was not there in the 1990s. So really gorgeous, really beautiful, huge city. And again, it was renamed Ho Chi Minh City after their George Washington, to be honest with you. Now, you might not think of him as George Washington, and the history books sometimes don't do it that way. But again, you got to go back to after World War II when Ho Chi Minh asked the United States for help and we declined. So then he turned somewhere else for help. So anyway, there's your South Vietnam. There's other parts of the world. Want to go anywhere else, Shabria?
Not sure. I was going through the Spratly Islands earlier, and I found a heart island and that they made. I was doing this last night, so
Oh
I
yeah,
kind of went through this for about an hour.
for an hour. See, it is such a great, cool thing. It really is. So if you zoom in, and some of these are just little tiny atolls with sand, and some of them have military bases on them now, like this one.
Airstrips, yeah.
And there's an
That one.
airstrip. I doubt there'll be photos on here where the Chinese will let them go, right?
Oh, I did
But
not
there's a
see
military airstrip there. There's a couple photos there. Okay,
that.
there's
Oh,
China. There you go. I'm sure, you know, it's not going to show you the military. Well, there's one there. Yeah, no military. But all of these, a lot of these islands have been pushed up above the water from sand and rocks. There's a nice little vacation place. Let's zoom in on that picture. Oil, yep. And this says Vietnam. So it's a Vietnamese oil rig. Okay, for now anyway, because it is somewhat close to Vietnam. But the Chinese have come in and tried to bully people out because of this oil and natural gas and hydrocarbons below the surface. There's a big one right there. And that looks Vietnamese to me. Viet, yes, Vietnamese. So yeah, go check out, I mean, Google Earth is just fascinating. It is unbelievably cool. And again, there are all these little tiny islands with military bases on some of them. Not that one. You'll have to go find them. Again, go into our readings and it'll show you pictures of some places, and then type in the name of the picture. You'll go right there.
That's what I did.
Yeah, that's how you do it. That's what I do. And I'm like, oh, it takes forever. It's awesome. Here's the city of Jakarta. I think the Dutch called it Batavia. And then you could actually see the coast. It is starting to get inundated as the sea level is rising. A lot of this coastal zone is sinking into the ocean. So you're having major issues in Jakarta here because of sea level rise. And there's a story from the New York Times, I think, about that. And maybe I'll link that too. But again, beautiful territory. Tons of people on this island. You can see how big the city is here. Take the photos off. And of course, the famous Krakatau. Let's see if I can bring that up. Volcanoes of the world. There we go. So we want Philippines, Indonesia. There we go. So here's Krakatoa, or Krakatau, as they call it. If you click on this, that brings up the Smithsonian Institute Global Volcanism Program, and the picture's sort of gone. But it talks about the eruption, the data. You want a larger photo right here. Click on there. Eventually it might come up, who knows? I don't know, maybe not. Okay. But you can see these pictures all over the place because this is a really famous volcano. There's a couple images of the lava beds. There's the ocean steaming with magma coming up. There's the volcano today. They call it Anak Krakatoa, which is baby Krakatoa, because original Krakatoa got destroyed in 1883. And there's baby Krakatoa now. It poked its way above the water in 1929, finally emerged permanently in 1933, and has been growing since then. And it's had a couple eruptions since that time as well. But it's really cool. There's a great book by this geologist named Simon Winchester. And it talks about geology and history and people and stuff. And then it also talks about biology, because then it became and they tried to keep people off the island because they wanted it to be a laboratory for how ecology and how islands are populated by birds and animals. Because if there's no island to begin with, and then there's suddenly an island, if you don't bring in species, they were studying how these became populated with birds and lizards and stuff like that. So it's pretty cool. It's a pretty cool story. So there's Krakatau. This island used to be this big. That's the original volcano right through here. And right now, little baby Krakatau is coming up above the water and exploding. And again, you can see how close it is to not Batavia, Jakarta. And this is the Sunda Strait, which then, since the 1880s, has not become the primary place of travel and commerce because of this blowing up volcano. Because you could travel, if you're a ship and you're traveling all the way this way, you go, I'm going to go here, and then it erupts, then you got to go all the way back and around that way. So might as well just go through that way first. But here's that line. You can see the huge line of volcanoes. And then there is that deep tectonic trench, subduction trench, that has one part of the ocean floor diving underneath another part, and then it starts to melt, and those are your volcanoes. So it's pretty crazy. They've also had a gas company drill into an underground cavern full of magma and gas. And since the 1990s, I want to say late 90s, they've had a mud volcano somewhere on here that's destroyed towns because mud keeps coming out. It's just gas and mud just filling up and destroying towns. And of course, that gas company got sued and they lost. So anyway, there is Southeast Asia. I hope you all had fun. And there's some pictures, some are mine, some are just off the web. So you have the big city, and then of course, right across the river, you have people who are barely making it right along the river. So they're fishing here too, all along the river. You have mostly, these are all girls. This is a little factory where I actually have bowls and spoons from this factory. You know, we wanted to spend money here to give back to where we're visiting, and the money went directly to these girls. Because I think this was the girl in charge who owned this little factory, which was kind of cool. So it wasn't like some guy with a whip and stuff like that. This was actually somebody's own little factory where they made all the bowls and dishes and stuff like that. Okay. You'll notice the difference between men and females here. The men have Western hats. Again, almost everybody has a hat for two reasons. One is to keep the rain out of the face and the eyes, and these are all females. Every single one of these people is females. And the other reason is to keep the sun out of your eyes, because the Vietnamese have this idea, the darker you get from the sun, the lower class you are, because you're in a field all the time working, so you must not be rich. So that's why a lot of the girls would wear these gloves all the way up their shoulders and cover their faces to keep their skin lighter. Kind of strange for us, but you know, we always want to go out in the sun, become tan. It's a little opposite there.
You can still see that driving in LA with people wearing gloves and face mask things at the beach with the actual total coverage from the sun.
Total coverage from the sun, exactly. And you can see here the ladies have those big conical hats, and the men have different types of hats, pith helmets, stuff like that. There's your rice cultivation. You can see the women are bent over doing the hard labor. The men are carrying the heavy stuff back and forth. I didn't see any tractors. I saw a couple animals pulling, but not tractors at all. Let's see, other things, other cool stuff. Social life stuff. Yeah, so I thought that was a little interesting. I want to show you something a little different. And of course, my experience is going to be different than anyone else's experience there. You know, I was just driving on a road and I saw all these houses. These are where people live on the river itself. They're sort of floating houses, and in the middle there's a fishing section, so you could fish underneath your house. It's kind of cool. And you got to end in the sunset. So there you go. So thanks for showing up. I appreciate it, Shabria. And for those who are watching later this week, just drop me a line if you have any questions. I have office hours Tuesday afternoon and Thursday afternoon and Monday nights. So good luck with everything. Don't forget about your homework that is due tomorrow night, Wednesday night. And then again, if you want more detail, here's your video lecture for that. Okay, so there's the modules right there. Anyway, ciao, Wiedersehen. I'll see you next week. Next week we head to Australia, New Zealand, and then the Pacific Islands called Oceania, which is kind of cool. So take care. Talk to you all soon.